Hello, boys and girls of credit union land, and welcome to the CUInsight Experience. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Mr. George Ombado. For those of you who don't know George, he is the CEO of ACCOSCA. I have had the opportunity over the past year to get to know George. It started with a DE development trip and workshop in Kenya this past June, and now we are recording this live from the 20th SACCA Congress that George and his organization put on, and that's being held in Mombasa, Kenya. This was such an amazing conversation to have. George is one of, by far, the favorite people that I've met in the past year. I'm so excited for some of the work that we're getting to do together, and I can tell you personally, it's just an area of the world that I can't wait to be more involved in. This was a really fun conversation, not only to hear about what's going on the continent, but the life lessons, the leadership hacks that George has had over a long career. Also, we talked a lot about DE and how the DE program has really been central in not only rising up the SACCOs, which they call credit unions in Africa, but really helping rise up the whole continent. So this was an exciting conversation. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed recording it with George. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with George Ombado. Enjoy. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're sitting here in Mombasa, Kenya. You're ACCOSCA, the 20th SACCA Congress just wrapped up. It was an amazing event. I appreciate so much you having me out here. So much excitement has come from it. I had the chance over the summer really to get to know you better and David Mategwa, being a part of the DE workshop, and just have fallen in love with what you guys are doing in Kenya and across the continent, and knew that I wanted to be a part of it more. Could you tell for our friends back in the United States a little bit more about ACCOSCA, the organization that you're the CEO of?
Thank you, Randy. For me, first, I also like the idea that we're able to meet and get engaged in this way. ACCOSCA, the trade association, supports the development and growth of financial cooperatives in Africa. What in the U.S. you call credit unions. In Africa, we either use SACCOs or the credit union. We work with all the countries in Africa. I know we have challenges in reaching out because Africa is a big continent. At the moment, we are working actively with over 20 countries, actually around 26, 27. And the way to increase the involvement of financial cooperatives with the credit unions, our idea is to get involved, like what the issues that you're doing through your institution.
Yeah, I've been absolutely blown away, and it's such a, learning a little bit more about ACCOSCA and what you do. It's so different in one sense from the United States because you're working with so many different individual countries that have their own governments and their own regulations and, bringing them all together. But an experience like this at the SACCA Congress, it's unbelievable to hear all the stories. So, and I know you have to be proud because there were over, close to 1,000 people here this week?
Yes. From 33 countries.
Unbelievable. It's been one of the most amazing, I can tell you, experiences of my life in credit unions. Julie Fergus and I, who did one of your pre-conference workshops, were just talking about how transformational it is. Both of us found our DE projects this week in this. So
that's good.
It's been amazing. And that leads me to a place that I wanted to go next, which was the DE program in Africa is amazing. It's like people are waiting to be able to participate, from my understanding. How did you originally get involved in DE, and why have you made it such a central part of what ACCOSCA does?
Okay. Thank you, Randy. When I joined ACCOSCA some time back, one of the key things that I analyzed with my team is Africa faced a lot of governance issues in the 90s. And then I look at a couple of trainings that have been done by different stakeholders across Africa. I realized that most of them were not that practical. So I was looking for training that will make people see the ethos of the credit union. Luckily, I was informed about the Development Educators Program, and through the support that I had from African American Credit Union Coalition with a couple of my friends, Sylvester Cazola and Ambassador Elkanah, we went to U.S. and did the Northern Carolina program. And after that, we knew this is the thing that will change Africa. For me, it was for a number of reasons. The ethos of the credit union philosophy has been lacking, and it's not fully understood. So when we got back to the institution that I work for, I used my position to pick the influential people in the continent, both from credit union, from government, from legislators who've gone through the program. Yeah. I knew if I do that, then they'll become our change agent. And luckily, that has been the case.
It's unbelievable. It's been the case. I know now you're even taking it deeper to delegate training, and it's been absolutely amazing to witness. I know you also had an interesting story from your time at DE in North Carolina with, the keynote speaker this week was Bill Cheney.
Yeah.
I guess Crissy Cheney was in your DE class?
Yes. Yeah.
Could you tell the story about?
For me, I know when I met Crissy Cheney in the class, I remember Lois said that you'd probably meet one of the ladies who is so passionate about supporting people, or somebody who just feels helping people is good in that context. So when I went through the DE program, one funny thing is definitely I enjoyed the program, and that's the reason why we ended up establishing the Africa DE program. But the weather wasn't nice. I know for those who are in US, that was a good time, but for me, the weather was nice. I was looking forward to coming home. On the last day when that was meant to happen, the flights were canceled. There was no plane taking off from the airport.
Because you had snow in North Carolina.
Yes, snow. My friend, Bill Cheney and Crissy Cheney gave us a ride from Northern Carolina to Washington, D.C., so that we pick our flight from there.
Back to Kenya.
Yeah.
They said there was a bunch of you jammed in the car driving through a snowstorm.
Yeah.
So I had never heard that story before, but it sounds like you all became friends, fast friends after that.
Absolutely. In fact, I feel like our DNA was well refined at that point. Yeah.
Been, and they're here too. Like I mentioned, Bill, your overall theme of the conference has been servant leadership, and Bill did a fantastic keynote on servant leadership. So it's been so great to even get to know everybody more as we're going through this together. So ACCOSCA has recently started a foundation also. I know Lois is your board chair. She was on the podcast before. Our friend David Mategwa is the vice chair. And Crissy Cheney, who we just mentioned, is also on the board. One question I had, the board of the foundation that you've started is very global. Was that something, specific or important to you in setting it up, or?
Yeah, we thought about this and tried to figure out what resources can we tap. Resources, even the technical resources to support the continent. I then had to use the DE framework to get people that we are close to and who have a passion to support the movement to see that we are at that level. And that's why you have that kind of composition. You have Lois Cage, David Mategwa, you have Batash,
Mr. Bertash,
Demba. So, and they were readily accepted. The board was approved by the General Assembly of ACCOSCA when we met in Accra, Ghana, with a clear indication that they had the work to support the development, the work that ACCOSCA is doing. I know the foundation has done a couple of things, but just focusing on health, education, and the bridge between the foundation and ACCOSCA is a research component. The information that we collect to support the foundation, the information that is collected to support ACCOSCA, because ultimately it's going to fall on the members.
Oh. I think it's fantastic. I know one of the first projects was the DE project that we did over the summer at Don Bosco School. We'll probably link to that beautiful video that your team put together on that whole project. So pretty amazing. One thing that really, or I should say I found interesting, And it may have been during Brian Branch's keynote, but you also, from WOCU, but you also mentioned it too in your opening remarks. The growth of the number of credit unions in Kenya is pretty spectacular and all across the continent. In the United States, just in the 11 years of CUInsight, we've saw credit unions go from 11,000 U.S. credit unions to 5. I hope that has nothing to do with CUInsight. But when you see like across the continent growth in the SACCO movement, is there something that you think that American credit unions need to do to change, or maybe do better we want to keep our movement alive as well, right? And I'll tell you, I was talking to some of the other people from the States here this week, and the growth we see here, sometimes it seems about opposite of what we're seeing at home, where their credit unions are disappearing. Any thoughts on maybe changes, or why you're seeing such growth on the continent? I'll
answer it in two forms. The first one is why there's possible changes in Africa. And the secondly, perhaps what can you see of relevance from American perspective of the continent? Africa is a young continent with a median age of 18. So most of the countries is between 18 and 22. That means a continent of 1.3 billion, or closer to 1.3, over 600 at the age of below 18. By default, we have the numbers to grow.
Yeah.
But because of the program that we've been having, credit to program like the Development Educators Program, there's current communication of let us manage the members' resources as effectively as possible. Let us focus on the members. You see, that is helping change the image of the SACCOs. And many other stakeholders across the continent who are doing that. But I think for us, the D has played that role to help people realize that if you are for the credit union, your focus should always be about the members. I liked what our keynote speaker, Bill Cheney, said during his keynote address, that if you want to be in the business of the credit union, as a CEO, as a board, in terms of servant leadership, your focus is on what you give and not on what you get. And that's very powerful for us. The governance practices that have also changed over time. Previously, the level of governance structure was not as it is today. Yep. So that is helping change the image of the cooperatives. Other things that ACCOSCA has also tried to help, and other players too, to show that this is a sector or industry that support inclusivity. A while ago, it was considered to be for the certain age. It was considered to be for men more. Yeah. So at the moment, we're seeing that kind of shape. And lastly, which again might be different from America, is our governments are involved. The governments have made it a critical aspect of their national development agenda to involve the financial cooperatives in their policies.
I'm sure ACCOSCA has had a lot to do with that. So, something that I found so inspiring this week, and it started from the very first day, pre-conference, was you had the first annual, so it's going to happen again, but the Women in Cooperatives Network Forum. And then you had followed it up with a breakfast for the young people as well. And whether it was Betty Rose or whether it was Daniel from Total, and was it, I think, from the cooperative in Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
I was so blown away and impressed by that. But when you're talking about being inclusive, and when you're talking about the age of the average person in Africa, it makes so much sense that group is there. And then the other part that I would throw in there was, I commend you and I applaud you, because you walk the walk. It's not just like a talking point for you. When your board got up there, it was a diverse board. That was stuff that I noticed that I think all too often, sometimes in the United States, even people talk about it, but they don't maybe make that step. And everybody at this conference, I felt like you were making that step, and I absolutely loved seeing it. So I would like to move on to the leadership and life hacks part. You have an amazing team here, and I know that comes from you at the top, where you're developing this next generation of young leaders. What inspired you originally to take the job as CEO of ACCOSCA?
That's quite an interesting question. As a development economist, one of the things that I normally say is we focus on the well-being of the people. No, we have different components of economics, but my passion is seeing how we can improve our lives in various forms, whether it's spiritual, economical, just environment to be conducive. So when I got involved in ACCOSCA to help develop the strategic plan, one of the things that I noticed were gaps, and I realized there is a lot of needs on the continent to use the SACCO business model. It took me a while, for instance, even to shop for an activity that is engaging like the DE. So taking the role was to say the institution was down, and bringing it up requires certain level of engagement. The second thing is, if it is fully engaged, it will give us an opportunity to help the continent or country better. When I started the position at ACCOSCA as a CEO, I remember we had active membership of 3-4 countries.
Okay.
And this has been steadily growing. When we started our first meeting for the regulators during my time, we were close to only 4-5 regulators, compared to this year when the 19 regulators sat under our umbrella during the meeting we had in Lagos.
Wow.
So that itself shows that those are the reasons why I felt the need to be part of this engagement.
So you've been on the job for quite a few years now, and you've seen ACCOSCA, it was mentioned many times during this event, come back from almost non-existence, right? And you were just talking about it. Has the inspiration changed at all over the years?
Yeah, inspiration in terms of where...
you personally, like how inspired you are to do the job. It seems like you're constantly going.
Yeah, of course you have the gaps that at times you feel, oh, you've done much, or there's resistance in some quarters.
Yeah.
Particularly when we're handling those critical issues of gender, youth, and just because of cultural practices. And I normally like saying this, culture is a way of doing things. So we need to make an effort to explain to people that way of doing things perhaps is not applicable today. If it was applicable 20 years ago, it might not be applicable today. So that has been a journey. And in terms of inspiration, I feel inspired because I'm seeing the leadership now is accepting the young people. You saw on stage when the launch of African Youth Network, you've seen the launch of the Women Network and the First Forum. This perhaps will not have been possible 10 years ago.
Okay.
There will have been a resistance at why, George, why are you doing this? Yeah, so for me, I feel encouraged in that. I also feel encouraged to see that the regulatory framework has led to stability, and SACCOs that were considered in a way 10 years ago, 5 years ago, going to die, are now quickly rising up, and people are able to say, oh, there's something good there that is able to help our people.
That's been an interesting thing for me too this week, is the idea that you're really working with to build the regulatory framework, and that's because it builds confidence to have that, where in the U.S. most of the time we're trying to get rid of some of the regulations, right? So it's such an interesting thing. From a leadership standpoint, how would you describe your leadership style?
My leadership style is I'm hands-on.
Okay.
I'll say that I'm hands-on, but I like to empower people. I like to see that those who are who have the right attitude, get opportunities and support their mentorship program. I'm very open. I believe that when something is not working, that critical evaluation is good, not to attack me as a person or me to attack anybody as a person, but to bring the issues on board. Because if we critically evaluate ourselves, then I think as leaders, we will do what we are meant to do. The challenge that we normally have is finding it a little bit challenging to accept criticism, but not knowing that it is that helps us improve.
It helps us grow.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I've met quite a few of your team. They've been amazing. How would they describe you as a leader?
That's an interesting one. I know for them, they will feel perhaps that when I want something to be done, I'll push until it is done. But again, I also believe they'll appreciate that I give opportunities and mentor those who are willing to do the job, those who have the right attitude. I strongly believe that they will say that.
So is there something that you've said so many times that like Maureen and Betty Rose could finish your sentence because they've heard you say it so much?
I know. I know for them when they hear me, when I have meetings, even like these, I have to talk about strategy and planning, because everything that I do, I have to think of the long term. We have a meeting, SACCA Congress taking place today, but the second day I was thinking about 2020 SACCA Congress. Yeah. I was trying to imagine the vision, how will 2020 SACCA Congress look like? So I'm more tactful and strategic in terms of big approach.
In the bigger project.
Yeah.
You just announced yesterday, where is the 2020 SACCA Congress?
Next year's SACCA Congress is going to be in the Kingdom of Eswatini in the down South Africa.
I look forward to being back for it. It's pretty exciting.
Welcome.
So, when you think back to earlier in your career, and you're now working with a lot of, you talked about the youth network and a lot of young leaders. Is there a mistake that you made when you were younger, or that you see young people make often as they get into leadership?
Maybe first when I started my role as CEO of ACCOSCA, that time that I was frustrated. And one of my great pioneers of the credit union movement in Africa, called Emmanuel Daku, told me, George, it is okay to feel frustrated. But at your age, realize that development, growth, the job that we are doing takes time. It takes a couple of years for people to understand. And that was the best advice that I've ever had, because when we started talking about the youth in 2013, there was a lot of resistance. And resistance not that it is bad, but resistance that it is not an issue that ACCOSCA should bring on table.
Okay.
Yeah, in our forums, and it should be discussed, but it should be discussed among the youth. So for me, what I feel is, and which I've learned is, at times you want to do something, don't be in a rush to do it. Yeah, don't be in a rush to do it.
So when you let's say you run into a place where you get frustrated, do you have something that you do to take a step back, or take a deep breath so you can refocus on it?
It depends on what. If it is about things that I think it needs to be done, I jump on it and do it, and then people will see that it can be done.
Yep.
And actually, that's what I normally do more often. My team knows that if I see something is not working and I can do it,
yep, I
will put my hands there and do it. Yeah. And the rest will join.
I love that. A question that I hadn't sent over to you, but I do want to ask you is, you're a leader of a team, the CEO of ACCOSCA. You have the organization, but again, we go back to the different countries that you're dealing with. How do you make sure that the ACCOSCA message is resonating and staying fresh with so many different people that you're trying to communicate that to? Is it just is it consistency? You just keep saying it over and over until they get it? Or
I know that's something that we should be doing. We should be doing better. But we've been trying to, when we have meetings, we communicate our 4 or 5 agendas, critical issues. So we communicate that. But we also realize that the communication, we haven't been doing it so well to the level that we would have loved. But I'm glad that the level in which we've communicated to has led to what you've seen in the last couple of days when people have attended the SACCA Congress.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been amazing. So this one, I'm not sure you actually have a free day ever, but you seem to be busy running all over the world. But if you do have a free day, nothing on the calendar, if you're not doing SACCOs, what do you do to unwind or in your downtime? Is there such a thing?
That is quite interesting. Actually, of late, my hands have been full, and I'm at times required to take it easy a bit. I like watching games. I like watching rugby, and able to travel if I'm able to do that. Luckily, at times when I'm out, I'm able to see the environment that I'm in. Yep. At times, it's not possible. Yeah, so I wouldn't like to point that, okay, this is what I do at my free time. Yeah. But sports, I like watching sports, and yeah, yes.
I know when we were coming back from El Dorado, you actually got to sneak a few hours with the family. So, yeah. Between flights.
Yes.
They were probably shocked to see you.
Yeah.
So I want to be respectful of your time. I know there's still a lot of people who want to talk to you. So the last part of the podcast, they're rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask the questions rapid, but you don't have to answer them that way. You can take as long as you want. So do you remember a time that you got into trouble that you can share with us when you were younger?
The first time I got into trouble when I was young.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe I think when I was a kid, 7, 8 years old, or just right there. In my bag, in my school bag, there was a pen.
Yep.
And when my mom opened the bag, she realized that pen is not my pen. And she was so upset that I have somebody's pen in the bag.
Oh, no.
And
Yeah.
the rest is history. Yeah, so for me, that I felt bad about that.
That was the end of your crime story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have something that you do every day, and if you don't do it, your day just feels off? People that listen to the podcast know I journal in the morning and just write down all the thoughts in my head. Is there anything you do that you kind of just have to do every day?
Yes. One of the things that for me is key is either before I sleep or very early in the morning, I plan for the day.
Okay.
So, and then if something doesn't work, then I get frustrated on that. But at least I do a map on what I'm going to do in the day.
So when you map that out, is that something you write down like on a
Yes.
notepad? Or
Yes, I do that.
Okay, and then you have it with you,
Yes.
so you know what you're going to do. That's fantastic. The random question for you: What's the best album of all time? Is there something you can listen to just over and over again?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that, I mean, you'd be surprised. There's reggae music I can listen to over and over. I know Bob Marley.
That was good.
One Love, that kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good one to add to the playlist. So both myself and Jill are readers. We have a stack of books in our house that we're trying to get through. Is there a book that you've either gifted people or that you've recommended people read over time?
Yeah, there's a book that I read, I just finished reading the other day on Allah Does Not Oblige.
Okay.
Yeah, book that explains that